And then I came up with this idea that, like, no, productivity is not about time management. Productivity is about mind management. Productivity is about creating the conditions, creative productivity, getting art done, if you will, is about getting your mind into the right state to make this creative breakthrough happen.
Welcome to Digital Mindfulness. I'm your host, Lawrence Ampofo. Today, we're really lucky to have on the show the entrepreneur and best-selling author, David Kadavy. David has had such an interesting life that we're going to talk about more on the show, but he really made his name by writing the best-selling book, Designed for Hackers, and by creating the podcast, Love Your Work. This is a really fascinating episode, and you should listen to it if you want to find out more about ways that we can be more productive while staying connected, how managing our mental states leads us to doing our best work, and how we can learn to love even the most monotonous parts of our work. But first of all, welcome to the show. We bring together the best teachers and thought leaders to teach you how to be your best self in an age of digital distraction and information overload. If you're new to the show, then the best place to find out more about us is to visit the start page, which is digitalmindfulness.net/start, which has a collection of some required listening podcasts where we discuss everything from becoming more focused in a distracted world to habit building, overcoming digital distraction, cyberbullying, internet addiction, and much more. Okay, enjoy the show with David Kadavy. Hi, David. Welcome to Digital Mindfulness. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show at last. So welcome.
Thanks so much, Lawrence. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on because I've listened to this show so many times, and it'll be surreal to hear my own voice on it.
So I'm wondering if you can just tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and in particular your really interesting journey from being a designer in Silicon Valley to being an author and now a podcast host.
Yeah, okay, I can outline that. I guess it started out, I always just loved design, loved creative work and artistic endeavors, and then became a designer, studied design. In parallel, got really obsessed with computers and the internet. My first AOL account in 1996, I made my first web page. And then those things converged, and I ended up getting a job out in Silicon Valley. Moved from Nebraska to Silicon Valley back in 2006 or so, and I worked there for a few years. And at some point, I realized that something about it wasn't sticking, and I tried to start my own companies out there as well. And something about it, I just had trouble getting myself to feel motivated and inspired to do the work that I was doing. And today I realize that the problem for me was about the economics of creating technology products, which is something that you're seeing today. The ones who are really winning are the ones who are grabbing people's attention. But so I also got interested in combating those distractions and actually getting work done when I wrote my first book, which is Designed for Hackers. And I was just kind of banging my head against the wall 12 hours a day just to get 15 minutes of flow out of it. And then meanwhile, the same technology that brought me the opportunity to have a book deal through blogging, et cetera, was always there by the wayside, with the potential to distract me and pull me off track. And so I got interested in that work, and then worked with Dan Ariely, the behavioral scientist, on a app called Timeful, which was a calendar app that helps manage your to-dos, and Google ended up buying that, and some of those features are now in Google Calendar. And now I have a podcast called Love Your Work, where I interview lots of entrepreneurs and creators and try to really get inside of the psychology and the emotional barriers that they have to overcome to get their work done. So those things might seem like disparate and unrelated things in some ways, but there's probably some ways they're related, and there's probably some ways they're related that I don't know about yet because I haven't gotten there. So I'm a little bit of a dilettante. I move around on a lot of different things.
David, this is really fascinating. It sounds like kind of everything through your career has been focused on time, and particularly not just teaching people how to support it or to manage their time better, but also just raising awareness of the importance of time.
Actually, I sort of ironically, the way that I got connected with Dan Ariely and that team at Timeful was because after I wrote the book, I'd gone through that process of just being blocked and like having this deadline, and I've got to write this book, and there's so much. It's so important to me to get it done, and realizing that creative work is not a linear thing, and I think that's something that being somebody who has followed the getting things done philosophy. We were just talking about getting things done before the interview. I think that there's sort of a linear bias that we expect work to get done in these linear steps. And it made me realize that, no, that's not the way that creative work especially gets done. And by the way, creative work, as far as knowledge work goes, that's like going to be all that's left as we have more automation and artificial intelligence, is the ability to do that which only a human can do. Creativity being one of those few remaining things, is so important. So actually, I ended up writing. I ended up doing some studying. I wrote some neuroscience books. I read some behavioral economics books. Obviously, some Dan Ariely books in there. And then I came up with this idea that no, productivity is not about time management. Productivity is about mind management. Productivity is about creating the conditions. Creative productivity, getting art done, if you will, is about getting your mind into the right state to make this creative breakthrough happen. And so I wrote this post about productivity is about mind management, not time management, and that's how I got connected with the Timeful team. So yeah, time management is, I don't want to downplay it entirely. If you have no sense of managing your time, you're not going to get a whole lot done. But really, there's this other layer of mental energy and getting into the right mind state that I think is so much more important, that I feel like we're just starting to get attuned to that.
So, David, you've written a book, Design for Hackers, and I just want to talk a bit about process. And we've just been speaking about this state of mind that people need to get into to do cognitively demanding work. And I'm wondering if you can just share with us, given that you've written this best-selling book, how do we get into that state of mind? What techniques can people use to really get into that state of mind where we can do our best work?
Absolutely. Okay, so this is very hard-earned, hard-learned stuff, because I was writing this book. I was trained as a designer. I had worked as a designer, so I certainly had gone through creative blocks and having to get into a creative state many times through the process of being a designer. But then I had to become a writer. I had to write a book. So it's a creative process, but it wasn't something that I was quite as well practiced in at that point. So the thing that I discovered, and this has been supported by some of the research that I've done, research being reading books after the fact, is that there are certain times of the day when your mental energy is best suited for different types of work. Now, for a lot of people, that's going to be your most creative in the morning. And most people say, well, you don't want to talk to me in the morning until I've had my coffee. Well, that's actually why you're more creative. So people who have prefrontal cortex damage, and by the way, you don't want prefrontal cortex damage, but this was for the sake of the study. The prefrontal cortex kind of helps serve as the executive that gets the other parts of the brain talking and moving in some sort of cohesive direction. People who have prefrontal cortex damage solve insight problems with more readily. So insight problems being problems like word triads, like if I can remember this right, if you have the words pine, tree, and sauce, and you ask the participant what's the one word that has something to do with that. Some people will try to solve it analytically by kind of taking a bunch of different words, and other people will just have like a burst, an insight, and that is a if they do an MFRI, if I'm getting that terminology right, if they do a brain imaging study of that, like that's like a burst in the brain. It looks different from when somebody solves a problem through analysis. So it's creating the conditions for that insight now. So people who have damaged prefrontal cortexes solve insight problems more readily. Now, in the morning, if you're a little bit groggy, if you're not exactly, your sharpest, you might actually be more creative. So that's a time that I personally take, and I block out all distractions. I face a blank wall. I put earplugs in my ears because I'm very, very easily distracted during that time. And I have a rule, don't check any email. I just get up, and whatever my most important project is, I'll work on it I'll tell myself I'll work on it for an hour, but it'll usually end up being 2 or 3 hours or something like that. And so that's the creative stuff. So say I was writing a book or something, I would write and I would try my best not to look things up. If I have trouble figuring something out, I would just put it in brackets. Try not to worry too much about spelling and things like that. And then in the afternoon, then I might have a research session where I look at the things that were in the brackets and say, okay, well, what do I need to research? Or I might then do some editing and make sure I get the grammar and all of that correct. So that's one way, is just recognizing the energy cycles throughout my day and working accordingly. And not only understanding those energy cycles, but also noticing that creative work is not linear, is that there are different layers of making like say an article happen. If you just sit down and you just try to write and get every single word perfect, then you start paralyzing yourself. So I give myself permission to do a barf draft, and then maybe I run to doing an outline, and then maybe I do some research, and then the polishing of getting the spelling right and things like that. Those are all separate parts of the process, and people tend to try to cram them all into one mind state. So there's kind of the basis of the way I think about it now.
Thank you for sharing that with us, David, because I know, like you say, these really are hard-won truths. But I'm really interested to know that now that you've gone through all of these, and obviously now you're kind of spending a lot of time on your writing, would you say that you love your work now? Or is it still a process that you have to go through, that you still have to go through the process of, disliking it occasionally and then kind of bringing yourself into that mindset you were just speaking about?
Yeah, it has been a hard one process. And I think that it's because I didn't come up in that type of environment with entrepreneurial people who look to do what they love. My dad worked at the same job for 37 years. At an insurance company. He didn't talk about work much. I mean, different time, different forces at work on him. I might have made the same choices, but I really always looked at work as, okay, I want to enjoy. If I'm going to be doing this for most of my time, I want to enjoy what I'm doing. So I'm always looking for that intersection, and what's the formula to that intersection between something that somebody really loves to do and something that's marketable. And then not only that, but also celebrating work itself. Notice it's not do what you love, it's love your work. So I think there's something to be said for celebrating some of the discomfort that's inherent in making a living out of doing what you love, is because it's not all prancing through a meadow with butterflies flying around or something. When you're doing what you love, like, you still have to dig in and do some things that are uncomfortable to make it work. So those three components.
I'm really glad that you've spoken about the importance of not just doing what you love, but loving what you do. And that's such an important but massive distinction that I wish I'd learned years and years ago. But I'm glad that, it's something that I'm able to share now. But I'm wondering, David, how, though, do people get through those difficult, frustrating, blocks that we always come upon when we're trying to do work that we love, or I guess indeed work that's important to us?
I guess there's a few different ways. One is I work for myself, so I at least have the choice to forego if something's going to make me a lot of money, but it's not interesting to me and I don't want to do it, then I'll just not do it. Or I'll find ways to cut down on the things that I don't want to do. Obviously, I try to delegate the things that I don't enjoy, like my accounting. I don't do my bookkeeping, my accounting, and things like that. But there's also, I love to write, but every time I sit down to write, I'm still just like, oh God, I just can't do this.
I think this is a really important thing for people to hear, because, oftentimes people might just look at the work that you've produced, or, the work that you've done, kind of producing the calendar applications, or looking at your book and just thinking that these things come from nothing. But it's really important to hear, I think, that you still go through that part of your brain that's telling you that, that I don't want to sit down and write, that this is all really difficult and that this isn't going to add up to anything, that this is still something that you have to work through every time that you get on and do this work.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that anybody who's a pro, there's just something about being, I'm a really big fan of Stephen Pressfield's books, The War of Art, turning pro, and he just has nailed it so much with his idea of the resistance, and the resistance is inherent in creative work. And if you're going to be a professional, if you're going to deliver things that people want to pay for, that hit people, like it's going to be hard. So how do I get over that resistance and actually, one, there is this idea of taking kind of a warrior posture to it, of, I don't know if it's like Protestant work ethic is the term, or what this, if just like taking pride in some of this discomfort and the fact that you're fighting that discomfort, and also breaking it down and fooling yourself, doing a little bit of what I call motivational judo. So the way that works is I will set a really insanely easy goal for myself, and I'll decide to do it every day. So right now, I write and publish a 100-word Medium article every day. Every morning, first thing, I get up and I say, all right, I got to write and publish a 100-word article. And part of the way that mechanism works is that if I fail at writing a 100-word article, I'm going to feel like such a loser that there's no way that I can possibly live with myself. Now, if I had set the goal to write a 1,000-word article every day, or a 2,000-word article every day, or set the goal to write a book, then it's a little bit easier to come up with some excuses and to say, oh, I couldn't do it because this other thing that's more important came up, or whatever. And then that's the beauty of doing it every day too, or at least for me, every weekday, is that you can't say, well, I'll do it tomorrow or something like that. And so that's the first thing that I do in the morning, is write that 100-word article. It's a little bit of my mental calisthenics, to get myself warmed up for the day. And having the habit takes away any decision fatigue that you might build up, because this is just the way things go. In the mornings, I put in the earplugs, I face the wall, I write my 100-word article, then I work on the most important creative project. I don't look at my email. If it's Monday, I don't think about my podcast. If it is Tuesday and I get an email from my accountant, I will use Boomerang so that it comes back on Friday, because I don't work on accounting on any other, because Monday, the early parts of the week is when I have my best creative energy. I don't want to waste that on worrying about, reviewing financial statements or something like that. I'm going to put that on Friday when I'm already kind of burnt out, but I can at least look at I can do some of these administrative things, or if I'm having a podcast interview, or somebody wants to have coffee, it's going to be Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. It's not going to be Monday or Tuesday. There's no meetings Mondays or Tuesdays, because that's when I have my best energy, and that's when I'm doing that work. So that's some of the ways that I think about managing my energy throughout all this.
So that act of just doing one small thing, like you were saying in your case, writing just 100 words, that's something that we've spoken about a lot on the show. And we've had, for example, BJ Fogg years ago talking about basically tiny habits, and how if you wanted to do something that's quite large, that required a lot of motivation to do, that you had to start very, very small. So if you wanted to go running, or if you wanted to be a runner or do a marathon, then the first thing to do was to run just for a minute, and to kind of build that up over time. And we were talking about this in the context of design, right? Kind of designing apps and technology to shape behavior. But it sounds like what you're saying, that this way of thinking can be applied to all areas of our life, including our work.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the ways that I first started working on my creative discipline was with what I call a 10-minute hack. And that is where I would sit down, and my focus too, and I would sit down and have a project that I want to work on. And I'd set my iPhone timer for 10 minutes and say, okay, you got to work on this project for 10 minutes. You're not going to check any email. You're not going to check Facebook or Twitter or anything. 10 minutes. Because obviously, if you can't do it for 10 minutes, you feel terrible. Like everybody has their threshold, right? Maybe it's 2 minutes for you. Maybe it's 20 minutes for you. These days for me, I try to make it like an hour is my kind of, okay, it's easy enough that I'll feel bad if I can't do it, but not so bad that I will crush my confidence or something. But then what I would find is that once I got 10 minutes in and that timer went off, then I'm in my project. I've got momentum going. I want to keep going. 10 minutes becomes an hour. 10 minutes becomes 2 hours. And also throughout that 10 minutes, it's going to happen. I'll open up a tab. I'll start typing FA to go to Facebook. And wait, no, the 10 minutes. And just my basic understanding of neuroscience and neuroplasticity, you just carved a neural pathway to resist going to Facebook and to stay on task once you've done that. And so the more times you do that, you're going to get better and better at overcoming those temptations. And that's another one of the nice things about having these little tiny goals that you can try to meet.
I just want to talk a little bit now about distractions, and particularly in your case, David, whether distractions can be a good thing, because normally they've been they're kind of vilified specifically for things like cognitively demanding tasks. But I'm wondering if you've ever found them to be useful at all.
It depends. Yeah, I think yes is the answer sometimes. For example, in the afternoon, I don't want to face a wall anymore. I don't want to face a blank wall anymore in the afternoon. That's just for a couple hours in the morning when I don't drink coffee. So I take advantage of my grogginess. And that's the time when it's easy for me to get distracted and off track. So I face the wall. I have the earplugs. And then in the afternoon, I go to a co-working space where I can have a nice view of the mountains in Medellin, or I go to a cafe and it's bustling and there's things going on. And then depending upon the task, that can help me. That can help me along.
I love that. Sorry to interrupt, David. You talked about taking advantage of your grogginess, because
yes,
we all have that. And again, just if you can, especially just for my benefit, but if you can just expand on that a little bit, because oftentimes when we have that grogginess, we just kind of succumb to it. We just start then, it's just FA, and then boom, the autofill comes on, and then you just go to Facebook or you just go to Twitter, right? So that grogginess overcomes us. But how do you hack that grogginess?
Yeah, well, I think that it's you have to be your own boss. And by that, I mean you have to make the decision ahead of time about what you're going to be doing when you're groggy. Because when you're groggy, you're easily distracted. You can get off track very easily. So having that little creative habit of I'm going to write a 100-word article, or James Altucher talks about I'm going to write 10 ideas a day. That's a thing that you can do if just you wake up in the morning and just write 10 ideas, no matter how silly or stupid they are, and take advantage of your grogginess. You'll be surprised what comes from it. And so, yeah, I think that's making the decision ahead of time of what you're going to do, so that just the same way if you have a boss that your boss tells you what to do, you've already said it's on the calendar, it's your habit, you're gonna do this thing, and it's an activity that takes advantage of your grogginess from a creative standpoint as well.
I just want to go back and quickly talk about mind states and how they help us to do our best work. And I'm wondering whether, we talk a lot on the show, again, about technology and the potential for technology to help improve or enhance our states of mind. And I wonder whether you think, for example, things like meditation apps or the other technologies that are available now, whether they can help us to get into those states of mind that you were talking about that help us to do our best work.
I think there's a lot of potential there. I think there's an issue with form factor or the delivery device, in that, I mean, I get it all the time. I'm like working on something on my computer, and all of a sudden it interrupts me and wants to update some software, or I'm trying to get something done on my phone, and then I get a message or a notification of something that's totally irrelevant to the thing that I'm trying to do, or you get a notification that's basically an ad from one of the apps that you're using. Like, there's obviously a conflict here between what we're trying to do with our tools and what other people are trying to do to us with our tools. So, one of my things that I do is I have an iPad and I have an iPhone, and on my iPad, I don't allow any messaging apps. My iPad is for reading. It is for a little app that I love by a guy named Andrew Johnson, called the Relax app. He also has another one I like called Positivity. And those are guided. He's a hypnotherapist, and there has these guided relaxation audio things that I listen to sometimes. If I have 25 minutes to take a nap, I'll listen to that instead of taking the nap, because it does more to relax me. But I can be confident that I'm not going to get interrupted, that I'm not going to open up my iPad when I'm done and see a notification of some kind. So I think that hopefully we'll see this more and more, that there will be devices a little more specialized for certain functions. Like, one of my fantasies, I haven't gotten around to doing this, but is to have like an iPod Touch that is only for, maybe I'm at the gym and I keep track of my workout in a spreadsheet, and there's no messaging apps. There's no way I'm going to get anything that's going to knock me off track. And there's just certain things that I do with that device. So, but yeah, as far as meditation, I hear people love Headspace, but I prefer to just, I guess I've listened to some podcasts for meditation. The Meditation Oasis podcast has some nice ones, but mostly when I meditate, I just do it.
I love what you're saying, David, because again, it sounds like you've taken control of your digitized environment, right? For example, you've said very clearly that I've got this iPad and there are no messaging apps on this. But I think that when a lot of people buy devices, or they enter into like a digitized environment like the workplace, that level of control tends to go, right? The phones will ring, everything will start to buzz, there'll be flashing lights, people will be interrupting them. And I'm wondering do you think that it's that lack of control that people have, or that is kind of given to other people or to other devices? Do you think it's that lack of control that leads people to not love their work?
Yeah, I think that was definitely the case for me, was that when I had a job and I worked for other people, I would be ears deep in some code and just, trying to get something done. And I've got figured out, okay, this function goes to this variable, and this is how this works. Or maybe I'm working on a bug and I'm trying to get a handle on what the problem is. Somebody comes up and taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, can you change the paper on the printer? Because that was also one of my duties at my first job was changing the paper on the printer or something. And then I didn't lose like the 10 minutes that it takes me to change the paper on the printer. I lose like an hour. And if you consider that, we don't really only have a few hours of really prime mental work every day, it's more than an hour. Like, I've lost an entire day. And if you consider that some days in the week you're a little bit more focused than others, then I might have lost a whole week really just from that one tap on the shoulder. And I think that I don't know, it's tough for people who work in an office. I don't necessarily know the solution. I think it's got to be cultural, and it would take a lot of it would take a lot of concerted effort to respect people's focus and respect people's deep work times, and to set up protocols for communication, because people just naturally have a bias. So if I have a problem and my colleague is sitting right over there, I'm going to interrupt my colleague and not think about how I'm interrupting that person's focus. Just naturally, that's going to be people's tendency. So I think the way that I imagine it working would be that there would be some time blocks where you kind of have everybody figures out what their deep work times are, and then you come up with some sort of a designated time between, like, all right, between 10 a.m. and noon, we don't talk. All communication is what's the word? Not asynchronous, right? It's in a chat or it's an email, and if they want to check their email, they can, but don't expect a response right away, type of things.
It's interesting, David, that a lot of the experts, the productivity experts, and there are some people as well in the meditation community that would talk about the importance of harnessing our attention. But it seems to me that from what you're saying, that it's actually more important to be able to manage our attention, right? That there are so many things, and there are obviously other people and stimuli that are competing for our attention. So in addition to be able to harness the full power of our attention, the ability to manage our cognitive load is also of critical, if not greater importance.
Yeah, I have a vague vision that there might be this sort of next wave of like a brain literacy, that we will get better attuned to what's going on in our brains and our brain states. I mean, especially with, there's different there's different devices you can put on your head, and you can look at your brain waves, and I think that as we have more visibility in what's going on with our brains, we might start to get a little more attuned to how that relates to the things that we're doing outside of our brains. And that might help us focus and make the most out of every moment.
But wouldn't that be fascinating, right? The ability for technology, with, like you were talking about, with the EEG machines and all these other wearables, to reflect us back to ourselves, right? Reflect the information that we're putting out into the world that was invisible, but then we're almost able to build up this profile of ourselves, this personality profile, like you were saying, through discipline and through work. You understand that actually I know when my best times of the week are to do certain types of tasks, and I know when it's best for me at the latter part of the week to have more, I guess, social time, use more of my social intelligence. But if we can have ourselves reflected back to ourselves, that goes another step to helping us live well in a super connected environment, right? Because if you're hyper connected, you are prone to having people just poke you on the shoulder whenever they need you, right? Because they're blind to the type of person that you are. But if that blindness is uncovered, then that would really help, wouldn't it? And yeah, brain literacy 2.0 or something.
Yeah, and actually, you made me think a little bit more in depth about a sort of a metaphor that I think of when I think about brain literacy, and that is that the first time, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but the first time that I ever picked up a guitar and somebody told me, how to make a chord on a guitar, I don't know if you've tried it before or people who are listening have tried it before, but the first time, for me at least, I tried to put my fingers on those strings and I said to myself, this is impossible. There's no way that I can get my pinky here while my ring finger is over here, and it's just not going to happen. Much less am I going to be able to switch to a completely different position. But and this is the part that you just made me think about, is that you get feedback along the way, right? You're playing the guitar and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound right, and you make adjustments, and then eventually through muscle memory, you really gain a sense of making those chords and switching those chords, and then even not just following songs, but maybe sitting and strumming and being able to play music. So I feel like the brain is the same way, and there's so much. It's just a 0 to 1 difference. The difference between being focused on what you're doing right now and not being focused, and somebody who has the skill to be focused kind of on command and has the skill to recognize when's the best time for the best work. The difference between somebody like that and somebody who's just trying to plow through everything all day with no sense about what's going on in their brains, I think is just 0 to 1. They're just completely different.
And imagine that, I mean, just those two different states of mind that you were talking about. I mean, imagine, like most of us, you're just going to work every single day and you're unaware of the impacts that all of these different information feeds have on you. You have no idea of the impact that, when you're getting into your work and then someone just pokes you or your phone buzzes and you don't know if it's important or not. That kind of life is, I would imagine, it's very stressful, right? It's very difficult to complete tasks. It's very difficult to engage in cognitively demanding tasks, which, as Cal Newport and lots of other people have talked about, are the most rewarded, I guess, by employers. Mm-hmm. But then being able to, like you saying, on command, through training, through feedback, to manage your cognitive state, to manage your cognitive load, your brain state, your mind state. That sounds like a blissful state to be in.
It's powerful. I mean, here's what I used to do. I used to wake up via an alarm on my phone, and then I would pick up my phone as I'm still in bed, barely conscious, and just to turn off my alarm, and there would be a thing on the screen, like a notification or a message from somebody on Facebook, and then suddenly that becomes my focus. First thing in the morning, I'm not even hardly conscious. And, it took a while for to dawn on me that what I was losing from that. And so my phone doesn't even go in my bedroom anymore. So,
So, David, do you think then that when machines or software can understand human beings better, that we'll begin to reevaluate our digital experiences, that we'll kind of come to think differently about what constitutes a good experience or a positive experience online?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't thought about this a great deal. I mean, I have thought about the fact that it's so economically it seems economically unlikely for us to be able to create technology that makes people better. I mean, it just seems like the technology has the ability to make us better, but for now we are selling off what somebody told me that a Facebook user is worth like $12 to Facebook. Like if we would pay $12 for Facebook, then Facebook would be serving us instead of serving the advertisers, right? Like if we would just pay $12, but we don't think that way yet. Maybe it will change at some point. Now, somebody who has talked about this a lot is Tristan Harris, who you've had on the show, talking about time well spent, and I think that sounds really promising. But I think that also for that something like that to work, the money has to come from the customer and not from an advertiser. And being somebody who sells digital products online, it's tough. It's tough to get people to pay for things. You have to really hit a specific need. It can't really just be like, oh, I kind of enjoy wasting my time with this particular thing, and now I'm going to pay for it. It just counters human nature. But then again, there's things can change. I think that we're seeing that a lot more people are, say, paying for a New York Times subscription now than were several months ago, because they feel that they're getting better journalism that way, better information than hoping to get their news always from free sources. Just as one example.
So, David, a lot of us don't work for ourselves, unfortunately, or we've kind of got habits that we've got in place from many years ago that unfortunately make it so that we don't love our work. And I'm just wondering that whether you can give people some kind of concrete tips in terms of, aside from the kind of the mental judo that you were talking about, how can people really learn to love their work?
I think that the best way to think about it is just through a sort of an overarching recognition or an overarching belief. And that being that you have a lot of potential, that you can, we all have something inside of us, things that we can create that are going to impact other people in a positive way. And that there are ways to make a living pursuing those things. But that there's also, in the technology and the tools that we use to achieve that potential, a lot of the time, other people have access to that technology and use it in ways to capture our attention and to sort of sell it off to the highest bidder. So I think that recognizing that, like, look, I love Facebook, I love Netflix, I really love Twitter. But I am constantly aware of, all right, am I getting something out of this, or is this getting in the way of my potential? What else could I be doing with these cycles of my brain? So I think that simply starting with that, recognizing that, then the specific actions kind of follow.
So, David, in a distracted and super connected world, what would you say are the most important human qualities, and how do we cultivate those?
I'm trying to think of a word that sounds less buzzy and sounds less fuzzy, but I feel like empathy is one of the best traits, and by that I mean, and I think the source of that is by understanding oneself and understanding one's own experiences and one's own insecurities and fears and the things that hold them back, or the things that make them, get angry even. And understanding that in oneself, I think that one can understand others better, and you can understand like these common themes of human experience that what philosophers have been exploring or pretty much had figured out over 2,000 years ago. So I think just an understanding of the human human experience and the dimensions of our own psychology and what makes us act the way we do, because I think that is where we get distracted, is when people start manipulating those things grab our attention or to stir our emotions to also grab our attention. And I think that if you can see those things, then you can exist outside of those forces and achieve your true potential.
So if empathy is really that ability to understand and feel what another person is feeling, you're saying that is the thing, that is the most important human quality that we have to learn to cultivate more.
Well, yeah, think about like this way, like the internet trolls. Everybody has opened up a Facebook comment thread and then regretted it because of the things that they saw people saying on there or trolls or something. But I don't know. I don't look at it that way anymore. I look at it from the outside and like, oh, look at this. I guess in the case of a troll, like trolls are damaged people. Like nobody, a psychologically healthy person does not get up and say, oh, this precious day today, the thing I'm going to go do is just go on the internet and mess with people. Like there's something going on in that person's life, whether they're aware of it or not, that is making them act that way. And so when you understand that, when you have empathy for even that, then it affects you a lot less and you can go on with your day to day.
So David, unfortunately, we've come to the end. Where can people find out more about you and your work and connect with you?
Well, if people are listening to this, they're listening to a podcast. So I think that my podcast is a great place to look. It's called Love Your Work. I put a lot of love and care into it. I have some fantastic guests like Dan Ariely and James Altucher and Laura Roeder and Jason Fried, just some wonderful people. Steve Case, the co-founder of AOL. That's the number one place. And then on Twitter, @Kadavy, KADAV as in Victor Y. Those are the best places.
Well, David, look, it's been fantastic having you on the show at last. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you so much for sharing your hard-won wisdom with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.